Okay, Genesis chapter 18. This is a chapter, pretty interesting chapter, actually broken into two very clear parts. The first part is the three men. We're told in chapter 18, verse 1, that the Lord, Yahweh, caps, all caps, L-O-R-D, all caps is always Yahweh or Jehovah. The Lord met with Abraham near the terebinth tree at Mamre. So this is Abraham's camp. He's sitting there at the tent door. He sees three men in the distance out by a tree. Whether he understands it to be the Lord immediately, it isn't quite clear, but he's showing them deference or showing them honor by killing a calf, asking Sarah to make some bread and bring out some water to them. So he's honoring them in kind of a traditional Middle Eastern culture of entertaining or welcoming strangers into the area. But by the middle of that chapter, you see something shift in the Lord speaking to Sarah and calling her out because she laughed at the promise that she would have a child within the year. So it does say specifically she's past the time of childbearing, and Abraham is 99, and the idea there is that they're both too old to have children any longer. Although the genealogy records make it sound like it might have still been possible in some degree, but because it's very clear in the passage, they're both past the age of thinking they would ever have a child. And at this point, God overrides that and gives them the promise, reviews, yep, this time next year, at the proper time, I will visit you. So it becomes an Old Testament Christophany, an Old Testament appearance of Christ in their presence, and he's speaking to them as Yahweh in human form. So these three men, second half of the chapter, then these three men turn their gaze towards Sodom, which is on the horizon down in the plain. And there's an open discussion, should we tell Abraham what our plans are? And there's a very interesting verse, important verse even. First half, I want to touch on verse 14, where the response to Sarah laughing, God says, is anything too hard for the Lord? So that's a key first half of the chapter verse. Key second half of the chapter verse is verse 19. God says, the Lord says, I have known Abraham in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord and to do righteousness and justice, that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him. So then the Lord speaks to Abraham. Their plans are to investigate Sodom, and if it's as they've considered and as wicked as he's considered, that it will be destroyed. So Lot, of course, is living there, and Abraham's first thought is, well, will you destroy the righteous with the wicked? He asks this question in verse 23. And then there's a progression, and the Lord responds, well, and Abraham kind of creates this argument, well, what if there were 50 righteous? Would you destroy the whole city if there were 50? God says, well, not if there are 50. So then Abraham feels like he's onto something. What if there were 20? What if there were 10? Surely there would be 10 righteous people in the city. Suppose there were 20, verse 31. Then he said, well, what if suppose there were even 10 would be found? And the Lord responded in verse 32, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. Verse 33, so the Lord went his way as soon as he had finished speaking with Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. So it's quite interesting. Lot has daughters, there's a family, there's a household, Lot's there. Now, we're told in 2 Peter that righteous Lot was tormented day and night living in that city. We're going to see in the next chapter how tormented he was. But that's chapter 18. Abraham feels like he's spared the city because there has to be at least 10 people in Lot's family that are righteous.